somebody who observes something, being able to do something about it.
Anyway, so that's all. We had a very quick conversation in the parking lot. So, and Tiff has to leave at 9.
Well, I have to leave a little before because
A little before 9.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the question, okay, well, I guess we can go live, right?
Yes, you are live.
Okay. All right. Good morning. This is,
Hold on, I'm trying to mute myself.
okay. This is April 29th. It's the meeting of the Sexual Harassment Prevention Panel. And we are sort of hopefully really finalizing this policy and procedures. So we have here Representatives Mulricky, Bloomley, McCoy, Feltus. We have Julie Tucker doing the technology, and Council Jen Carby, and Arlene Donovan, HR person, and I'm Molly Burke. Okay.
Okay. So, as the chair said, good morning, Jennifer Carby, Office of Legislative Counsel. So I have for you what I think is ready to be your final draft of at least the House's proposal for the policy, and I think it's posted on the committee page, which might be the easiest way to
On the committee page, okay.
put it up. Under today.
So for anybody who's watching, we're going to look to the
Oh, no, I have the cleaned up version.
Sexual Harassment
Yes.
Committee page.
Julie, I'm going to send you the clean version. Post and that's what we'll look at.
So would that be from Friday, April 22nd?
No, I'm actually sending Julie this clean draft right now.
Okay.
Sorry, it's that time of year. There's a lot going on in a lot of places. So I will also put that up on the screen. So now you should be able to see this clean version. And so I just updated the date. So House Draft 42922, and that way we can share that one with the Senate panel, and they can be working on this. But it's just the cleaned up version of what we looked at
Okay.
last time, incorporating the changes that were made there. Looks like we've had some strike throughs or highlighting on the last one. So again, I don't know what you want to look at in this. We can take it from the top if you want, or if you just want to take a minute to scroll through. I had it edited as I was done with it as well.
What's the committee's preference? You feel comfortable just scrolling through, or?
The new version, and I guess the new version may not literally be posted yet. So,
Yeah, it's not there
it's
yet.
not yet.
No.
Yeah, but there is that lag time. Yes, it is. So, well, I can take you through what's here. Want for you, and then you can go through yourselves as well. So this is and what's changed everything to say Vermont General Assembly. It being, of course, the ultimate goal to have one policy that applies to the whole General Assembly. So it talks about being the policy of the General Assembly to provide a professional working environment. Although we did change that in other places, so if you want to change that here, we can. Free from sexual harassment, and that you prohibit both sexual harassment and retaliation for reporting or cooperating with an investigation. It talks about the House and Senate panels and the joint panel. And then it identifies this concept of regulated individuals. So the policy sets standards concerning and regulates the conduct of representatives, senators, and all staff who work for the General Assembly. And this policy is intended to protect really everyone in the building. Legislators, staff, pages and interns, and members of the public who experience sexual harassment attributable to regulated individuals. And we have the definition and examples And last time we made a few changes to that paragraph at the bottom of the page so that it now says sexual harassment may take many forms, including verbal, physical, auditory, or visual, or a combination, and may be communicated by any means, may be subtle or overt. A lot of this language is the same as it has been throughout. Let's read through that. We have the examples, and we had made a few changes to that as well, including in some cases taking out the requirement that behavior be continual in nature, like writing sexually suggestive notes, letters, emails, etc. That once would be enough to constitute sexual harassment. Then we have the reporting and responding. And so this is where both someone who feels that they have been sexually harassed or who have witnessed behavior that they believe is a violation of the policy have various options. They can identify the objectionable conduct to the person who engaged in it and ask them to stop. They can contact the appropriate panel. They can contact a supervisor if they're staff. And they can contact Office of Legislative Human Resources, so Arlene or Eliza. And then there are some other resources that we show at the bottom. There is, in the second to last paragraph, that exception to not having an obligation to do anything, and that's if there is sexual harassment committed against anyone who is or appears to be under 18 years of age. That's consistent with your current policy, but that needs to be immediately reported to the Chief of Capitol Police and the Sergeant at Arms. There's the confidentiality provisions, and a lot of this gets also replicated in the procedures in more detail. And there's the potential penalties, so different penalties if we're talking about a representative. It just occurs to me now, as I'm looking at this and going through it, that this is really looks specific to the House. So we will need to fill in some of the details for the Senate if this is to be a joint policy, but I think we'll work with the, seems appropriate to work with the Senate on that. So this talks about the House panel, but I will just highlight that. And then we have intern staff and volunteers. Training and information, and then the other resources. And then finally, we have those addenda. So the first one is the jurisdiction of the panels and that chart from your current policy. We have the names and contact information for the panels and for the House and Senate supervisors and for human resources, and then a place in Addendum C to list names of sexual harassment prevention facilitators. And I think there was some discussion about waiting until the next biennium. We're almost out of time for that. So,
Does anybody have any concerns or questions?
there's a meeting to add the Senate and their, which I think is appropriate for the Senate to do, their corrective action options. Are there any changes?
But as far as how we're adopting it, can we adopt it from our perspective and maybe in this preamble say it's intended to be a joint policy, but for now, until the Senate acts, it's really only a House policy.
I think what we had talked about was doing kind of a straw poll to indicate that this is your proposal to the Senate, and then have the Senate do its work on it. The Senate has a different process and that requires the whole Senate to adopt theirs. But I think it may be confusing, particularly toward the end of the biennium to change the policy
I see.
Does,
and have separate
so
policies.
we can, but we as a panel, so if they adopt it and start their process, which involves doing to the Senate, can we just meet like and just say, formally that we approve it, or what would be the process for us?
Yes, I think you just got, because under house rules, this panel adopts the policy rather
Right.
than the full panel having to do it. And because you just adopted or amended the rules, I think, so that you can meet remotely
Right,
when you're not in session, I believe we should be able to do that. I'd like to,
so if they don't get this done before the end of, before we leave here, we should meet remotely to have a formal adoption?
well, they will not be able to, unless they can figure out, unless they can come to some sort of consensus before the General Assembly adjourns,
Right,
they cannot adopt the policy because theirs requires the full Senate to adopt it. So I think my recommendation would be that you continue under the existing policy through this biennium,
uh,
because you'll be mostly not in the building.
yeah,
And that the next panel formally adopt with the Senate panel and JLMC going into the next session. Do you have a different take?
I don't think so. I think that's probably the
And I don't know if you were here, Jen, but Marty's not gonna be back next year.
Oh, no, I'm
sorry,
sorry.
So I don't know how that, if then, if there's, you need to get somebody new appointed and then the whole process for that, Mike?
Question for both you and Jen. And it's based on my experience with this committee and in general. Stop me if you've heard this before. If we wait for the Senate, we may be waiting.
I know.
Why can't we pass it now and hopefully put some pressure on them? Yeah,
I think if you wanted to pass something now, for one thing, you'd have slightly different rules for what constitutes sexual harassment in the State House. So that's a bit confusing, and I think the processes would be different. We'd also need to revise it to specify that it's just for the House. I think my concern is having, we did change a few of the provisions, things like continually writing sexually suggestive communications, or we added a should be known. It just means that the criteria for what constitutes sexual harassment, I mean, they are examples, they're not exhaustive, but arguably the rules would be slightly different.
So if they met, like, next week, and what does this have to be, how does this get introduced to the Senate? Does it have to go to a committee then and be introduced? It has to be on notice? What's the process there?
It's a good question. I'm not sure their rules specify that. They just pull up their rules. They talk about the Senate adopting a policy. So I think it would be
Should I go
question for Secretary
find out
Bloomer.
from Secretary Bloomer what might be? It would be great if it would be great if they would just look at our policy and say, fine. And
Which
then,
is why.
I think it's, we can always amend this, right? And
I would advocate for some path here where we, the House, can acknowledge that we're going to have procedures in one document and policy in another document, and we've reviewed both of them, but we've certainly, I think, come to a conclusion of how we want the policy to work and just adopt that as a House policy and say, we hope the Senate will agree with it at some time, but in the meantime, the House has this policy.
And it would mean, doing a global change of those references to General Assembly and
yeah,
Right.
the Senate and the House, but that's not a big deal.
No, I don't think
that
I
would
don't
be
think
simple
that's
enough.
I don't think that's administratively.
Leaning towards that, so that at least we've done our work.
Well, this happens all the time.
we come
Molly
up,
and I have been on it, and Marty's beginning it, and we get it done, and then the Senate,
and it just sort of
yeah,
hangs out there and we don't have a clear policy. And then we say, well, we're operating under the 2018 policy. I don't know.
I would agree to move it.
So there may be a need to revisit again then next year, because if the Senate does proceed with something, it will likely not match what you have done. We will have two entirely different policies.
Right.
So, yeah, then revisit it would be just, we would meet again. We see what their objections are, their objections to our policy, work out the differences, and then have another adoption. It wouldn't be too complicated, right? It might be complicated for them, but it wouldn't be complicated for us. Right.
But in the meantime, the House would have a
Yeah,
firm
okay.
adopted policy.
And then do we have to, does it have to go through, does it have to be presented to the Rules Committee? What,
For your, on your side?
yeah,
No, the rules just say that you adopt it and then you have to distribute it to the House.
okay.
So you need to, so we need to,
And maybe, and that should get done, if we adopt it now, that should get done now,
Yeah.
right, this week,
I like it.
all right.
Maybe March.
Last time we did that, we adopted it, and then there was a whole House session as kind of an introduction, but we could get away with that
Well,
this year.
then
and
I
just
think at the
send
beginning
out
of
the
the next
copy,
biennium,
beginning of next
we
year.
have the policy, this is the House policy, it's
Right.
been adopted. It may change a bit depending on, because we want to coordinate with the Senate, but meanwhile, we needed to get something done.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. All right,
Take charge group, okay.
So do we actually need to vote on it?
if you are planning to adopt it, yes, I am going through and creating a new version that,
okay,
So I move that we adopt the policy for prevention of sexual harassment as presented today. We don't, do we have a draft number?
She's working
no,
on
because
it.
I'm creating a new one.
With specific
that's
reference to
just
the
for-
House only.
Just the House.
and then I will just, for courtesy's sake, let the speaker know. And then
I
we'll
think that's a good idea.
get the draft and send it out to, well, maybe I'll have I'll have the speaker's office send it out.
It's not a draft, it'll be the policy.
Yes, right, you have the, send it out through, I think through the speaker's office would be best. Mhm. Yeah,
And she can say the committee has worked long and hard for the last 2 years, 4 years, whatever.
Do you need a second for that one?
And here it is.
I don't know, is this one of the ones that you need a second to, or do you
I
not?
don't believe your process actually ever requires a second, but you are welcome to do, they are often done anyway.
Okay. Seconds and thirds?
Check with the clerk.
You get your, oh,
I'm gonna do that,
I apologize, but
it's totally understandable.
So we also have draft procedures, and I don't know if you want to try to do anything with that while I'm working on this, or if you,
Sure, we'll move that as well for a vote.
I think we've gone through them a lot.
mhm.
So we've been working right along.
And I think, you know, if we have any situations,
or a couple
we
of
might come
questions.
up against something and go, you know what, this isn't really working. This is gonna be like a living
It's
document.
not a static document.
Yeah.
no, no.
Yeah.
Use the right,
Yeah.
Oh, so
And it's a guideline, and
I know.
it's great to have the policy. There may be some gaps, we don't know.
you have to go ahead.
Yeah, am I allowed to say what my intention in voting
We
is?
can vote now.
And just because yeah,
All right, so Representative Lumley,
yay.
okay. All right, I think you. Is that okay, Jen?
Whoever's taking down the vote, I don't know who wants to do that. I don't think you have a clerk.
Right.
But you can just note that
Have no clerk book?
that Representative Lumley has voted yes, in anticipation of the revised draft of
Okay.
to the House.
Yes.
Julie, is there a blank form we can get for before you vote?
Maybe I should get one from the clerk's office. I think I can remember. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tiff.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Tiff. Bye.
See you on the floor.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to go through and make changes to the document to reflect that it's just the house, but in the meantime, we also have draft rules of procedure, and I've just indicated the changes from the last draft, so I think we saw in a couple of places in the informally contact, we kind of had repetitive language about the obligation to take immediate and appropriate action, so we were taking that out in a couple of places because it comes up later. As far as the issue about working with council, and I just sent this to Julie, so hopefully it'll get posted, but it was, I worked on it last night and I think somebody else made changes between then and now, so. So for the informal complaints, it requires the panel to consult with the Office of Legislative Human Resources, and then I put with either, and with either the Office of Legislative Counsel or outside counsel as appropriate under the circumstances. Recognizing that in most cases, for an informal resolution, it's probably going to be fine to just work with legislative counsel, but depending on the sensitive nature of a particular situation or relationships between staff and members, it may be appropriate for outside counsel to be involved. So that's I added that language in both places for the informal complaint where that came up, as well as the preventive action. So there was one place where we had noted a decision point for the panel, and that is for responding to a formal complaint. After the panel receives a formal complaint, you provide a copy to the respondent and request that the respondent file a response with the panel. And there was maybe, do you want to put in a certain number of days within which they have to respond? I'm trying to remember if it says in the ethics panel, or I think the ethics panel at least has given gives a number of days, and it may be, I can't frankly recall if it's 14 days or 30 days, but some period of time. You may not want to leave as long as 30 days.
That's a long time.
Yeah, but 14.
Five.
Seven?
Seven for the discrimination.
Oh, okay, thank you. The discrimination panel, thank you, that's great. Requires the respondent to file an answer within 7 business days unless you extend the time. It does take a bit for somebody, particularly if they're going to consult with counsel or someone else. To
Right.
formulate a response, although it will not be.
30 is way too long, a week. is-
Responding meaning just saying we got your complaint.
No, this is the respondent filing a response, so potentially writing
Sorry,
something up.
I'm sort of not sure where you're at right now.
Oh, I'm
We're on
sorry.
the procedure.
So we're in procedures, and in response to a formal complaint. And I think you may have to refresh. I just sent it to
Okay,
Julie while you were here. Julie, have you posted documents?
Right in the middle.
Oh, okay, thank
The
you.
first one's there, but.
First one's there, okay. Mine isn't actually showing
I'm only
anything for today
getting-
yet.
documents from Friday, April 22nd.
Me too. Well, I can email this to
Okay, that would be
the
the,
panel. Why don't I do that?
that'd be faster.
You don't need to watch me. Turn that. Oh, good, you can't see the rest. I'm gonna take down the share. That's so I don't inadvertently show you my entire. Look. Now, email that to all of you. That will put it back.
Good evening, sir. Oh, there we go. Okay, great. All right. So we were just talking about,
So we are at the bottom of page 3 and we are looking at, and sorry, I just jumped to the changes. So we've kind of gone through
Yeah.
informal complaint resolution, then we're starting into filing a formal complaint and a response to a formal complaint. And so after receiving a formal complaint, you provide a copy to the respondent and you request that the respondent file a response with the panel. And the
Okay.
discussion was about putting in a number of days.
yeah.
The suggestion of 7 business days is what the discrimination panel does.
Okay.
Okay.
How does everybody feel about 7 days? I think that's fine.
Fine.
Okay.
And I assume you would want to keep that you can extend that for good cause. Great. And then there is language on the next page about when you receive the response. And now that you've put in a time, it makes sense to add or after the time to file a response has passed. So you have a sort of time certain when you can start doing things. And again, we have consulting with human resources and either legislative counsel or outside counsel as appropriate. And for these, I think that the assumption is that it may likely be appropriate to consult with outside counsel if we're getting to a formal complaint. But again, I think it may depend on the
We
allegations.
just, hold on a minute, Patty, we just, if you go back to the bottom of,
Is it email? Or is it-
Yes, I did
just send
email.
a,
I did email it
Email,
just a
okay.
few minutes ago. A few minutes ago.
what the issue is, responding to a former complaint and the respondent's response to the panel within 7 business days. That-
We're now, we
okay,
were on
yeah.
page 3.
Yeah, so at the bottom of page 3 is the response to a formal complaint.
Oh, right.
So you provide a copy and then request that the respondent file a response. And
7
the
days.
time we were discussing was 7 business days, which sounds like is what the discrimination panel is doing.
Is that okay?
Does that work
Yeah,
for you?
Okay,
That's good.
all right, just wanted to double check. All right, okay, we can move on.
Great. Okay, so then we added in that or after the time to file has passed. So again, I'm just jumping to the changes at this point. So, oh, I think Damien may have highlighted this. So at a hearing, I think the discussion was that you would likely have the assistance of, we may want to put in the same language, just to allow for the possibility that legislative counsel would be involved. But I think in most cases, if you're dealing with a formal complaint of sexual harassment, we should not be involved. But I can fix that up.
Okay.
And then here's another one that I really wanted you to look at. So this is outcome of the hearing. And you had talked about what threshold you wanted for deciding that there is or was not a violation of the policy. And so I've put in here for you to consider if at least 4 members of the panel find either there is or is not. That is or maybe you just want if at least 4 members find that there is. So you may want a higher bar for finding that there is than that there is not a violation. Because I'm not quite sure where it puts you if you don't have 4 finding. Anyway, you can think about that, but that is what the ethics panel
Okay.
does, is they require 4. So it's sort of a super majority, but not
Yeah,
not
I think
unanimous.
To say that there's not.
There either is or is not, and maybe
Yeah.
it does. If at least 4 members find there is not clear and convincing, then you dismiss the complaint. If at least 4 members find there is clear and convincing, then you recommend corrective action.
Oh, I see.
And
Right.
if you're at a 3-2, I think you have to keep going.
Not 3, 2. I think
Um,
4 is good.
Okay,
I agree.
okay. I know there had been some concern about having,
3, 2 is just,
yeah, right, about having 3-2 when it may have a pretty big impact on somebody's life. And then I just cleaned up the references to the House Rules Committee being, recommend that you would recommend appropriate corrective action to the rules committee, because you don't. But I thought leaving in some references to the House rules, doing things in accordance with House rules was kind of a nod to what you can and cannot do as the panel. And then in Rule 20, and I think this, I don't know how the other panels have been handling this, but I know we had talked about, I had several notes on my copy that we had gone over, wanting it to be a little bit more clear about the confidential nature of the panel's work when you're dealing with a complaint. And so I just added in here, along with the confidentiality, that all panel discussions and deliberations conducted pursuant to this policy would be confidential.
How does that work with public records requests?
So you can see right below that in subsection B, all records produced or acquired in accordance with the policy
Okay, not
is not subject to the Public Records Act. So they're simply outside of the scope of the Public Records Act. And then I believe you had talked about 15 days. Either you had, or that was something that staff had discussed that we're proposing, but that somebody may appeal the decision by submitting a written statement to the chair within 15 days following the panel's issuance of the decision. So you kind of know when it's a done deal and when it's not, when it's still open.
Yeah.
And that is it.
Okay.
If there were, and I'm sure we will continue to refine these, but
Okay.
I think that can be done as you go along in a way that doesn't need to be uniform across
Right.
the branch.
Okay.
So should we take a vote on the policy and the procedures?
I think if you feel ready to, and I'll, clean the highlighting off the draft.
Everybody feel ready to vote?
Since Tiffany isn't here and we
She did.
moved the policy.
Yeah.
I think we can move the procedure.
Right, I think you can if you want, I think if you want to,
Voted on the policy.
right, if you want to collect her vote. you can make your
Afterwards, or-
Votes open.
But do we all have to be together, or no? I can just go to her and say, do
Hold it open for her.
you approve the? Yeah, leave it open. Okay,
Either that, or I think the procedures are a little less
yeah,
rigorous than the policy.
Right.
And I think we need the whole panel to vote on the policy.
Right.
Done.
okay.
Will
She
do.
has voted on the policy.
Yep.
All right, so I'll call the roll. Representative Feltus
Yes,
on the policy
On the
and
policy.
procedures, right? Do we want to,
Do we separate?
I would do.
okay, separate. So we're voting on the policy right now. Okay.
yes,
Um,
for the policy.
Representative McCoy?
Yes.
Representative Mawicki?
Yes.
Representative Burke? Yes, okay. So we have 5 votes in favor of that. And now we need to do the procedures. Okay, Representative Lindley is not here.
I make a motion.
Oh, yes, make a motion.
Next procedure dated 4/29/22.
Yes,
All right. Try to go in alphabetical order here. Representative Feltus?
Yes,
Representative McCoy?
Yes.
Representative Mawicki?
Yes.
Representative, yes, okay, I will track down Representative Lindley and get her vote. So what needs to happen now?
so I am making myself a note so that when I go to my next meeting, I don't already forget to make that policy for the House only and clean draft of the procedures. And then I will send both of those to the panel.
Okay.
And then you as the chair probably communicate with the speaker and talk about distributing to the full house
And
and
announce
the House.
to the speaker that we voted on the policy and procedures. Okay, great, so you will send, I've got to make those notes.
Right, yeah.
You will send, and then
Yep.
I will send it, talk to the speaker, and then send it to her, and then ask the speaker's office to distribute.
I think, talk to the speaker about how she
they
wants
wanna do
to,
it.
yeah, how they
Okay.
want to distribute it. They may want it to come from you as the chair of the
Okay.
panel, or they may want to send it. out.
Okay, okay, great, wonderful.
and you
all
may
right.
want to make an announcement on the House floor, depending upon how all that works out for the speaker.
Yeah, well, right,
Figure that out.
you could look at, okay, so I think that we're done for today. Thank you, Jen and Arlene and Julie for facilitating this and making this all happen.
And Julie?
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you ready to go on?
Yes, and we can go off. And thank you, panel